As we know, reports over the weekend place Washington and Oregon one step closer to Big Ten membership. Now to the exercise of placing them in the Big Ten, scheduling and formatting the new Big Ten. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We break down the game we all love each and every day with you. Best discussion, debate, and analysis based on your participation and engagement. Even if you don't agree with me, if you love the content, please hit the like button and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football and check out our team channels, which include the Oregon Ducks. All right, let's not confuse things here. I'm not reporting and going to another degree in regards to the speculation and the reports out there that the Big Ten has vetted and cleared Oregon and Washington for membership. Check out the live stream that we did on Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten. That deals with the reality of, is this a done deal? Is this going to happen? How likely is it that these two schools are joining the Big Ten versus what the exercise we're going to go through now, which is Oregon and Washington are in this world, in the Big Ten, in this universe. They are in the Big Ten. Now we have to decide what to do with them in regards to placement, divisions or pods, scheduling, playoff system. What do we do with Washington and Oregon? Let's place these two schools in the Big Ten, and let's have some fun in determining the best, most effective, and most fair way to format the conference. So the first format we propose would be 4 divisions. So you've got a Big Ten Western Division of Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA. Then we've got a Big Ten Northwest Division of Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Illinois. Next, the Central Division, Michigan, Michigan State, Indiana, Purdue, and Northwestern. And finally, the Big Ten Eastern Division, featuring Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, and Ohio State. Now, that seemed easy, but does it make sense? There are a number of factors that we need to look at in terms of the equity of the balance of play within those divisions, the quality of the football programs, and if it's going to work in regards to scheduling, ensuring rivalries are played each and every season in the Big Ten. So in this first proposal, of course, all the teams within a particular division are going to play each other. We've got 2 4-team divisions, 2 5-team divisions, and then we are going to go throughout the rest of the conference for the rest of the games, and we're going to protect rivalries. I'm not going to go through all the rivalries. Most of them are within the division, so they're protected automatically. And then we will protect the other important rivals. Let's start with the most obvious, Ohio State and Michigan. So we are going to go by my expertise, but we're also going to go to the schools. We're going to go to those athletic and football programs and talk to each school to determine what rivalries need to be protected, and we will protect those rivalries. The rest of the games will be determined on a rotational basis through the rest of the conference. So we will have 9 conference games. Now let's check out how balanced these divisions are in regards to the level of the football programs. So the Big Ten Western Division is extremely strong with the 4 programs that we serve up from the West Coast. Those 4 teams went 41-12 this past season. How does that compare to the Northwest Division? Well, that Northwest Division is going to be a little bit weaker. There's no getting around that. If we are going to play geography, if we're going to make that a huge factor in this, so 41-12 for the West, 35-28 for the Northwest Division. Now for the Central Division, their record this past season was 31-33, despite the presence of Michigan. Northwestern weighed that down considerably at 1-11. Indiana had a horrible year as well. Michigan State had an off year, so we can't just go by 1 year, but I wanted to give us a gauge or an indicator looking at last season's records. And in the East, those 4 schools last year went 34-16. How about taking it back to the 2021 season? The West comes back to 67-36. So again, we can't overreact to one season's play to keep this equitable. The Northwest Division did much better the previous season as Iowa won 10 games and Wisconsin won 9 and Minnesota won 9 2 years ago. So they even it out a little bit more with better play over time. The Central Division, the same thing to a certain extent, as Michigan State had a big year 2 years ago. Purdue was strong at 9-4. Northwestern was just horrible the last 2 years and really weights down the record for this Central Division. And then when we look to the East, of course, we get a situation where currently Ohio State and Penn State are powers. Maryland's a decent football program, and Rutgers is awful, but that's the 2-year record for the Big Ten Eastern Division. Our goal for our scheduling system is to protect rivalries, number one, and number two, to create schedules that are as close to composite 500 schedules as possible. What do I mean by that? That if you look at each individual team's schedule within the conference, that if you look at that schedule and add up all the records of all the teams on any particular school schedule, you will see that my committee would add it up and get to as close as a 500 record from the previous season on everybody's schedules. Now let's look at formatting a playoff system or a championship game that would determine the Big Ten championship in the fairest way possible. We could go to a playoff system where we would take the 4 division champions and they would play a mini playoff. They would play semifinals and a Big Ten championship game, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. And of course, you automatically get a tiebreaker in each division because everyone plays each other in the division. Or because of the additional playoff games in the national playoff, we could eliminate 2 division champions and we could go with the tiebreaker and just play the top 2 seeds within the entire Big Ten Conference for a championship game of 2 division winners, but not necessarily all the division winners. And again, just take the top 2 division winners, but then you run into issues with if you have 2 teams with the same record and they didn't play each other and they're both division champs, then you need some NFL-style tie-breaking system that I would not want in this particular situation. So I would love the 4-team mini playoff semifinals and championship game within the Big Ten to determine who wins the Big Ten. Our next proposal, instead of 4 divisions, we've got 3. We've got a West, a Central, and an East. The Western Division looks like this: Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA. Then the 2 most Western schools of the existing Big Ten, that would be Iowa and Nebraska. Our Central Division looks like this: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, Michigan. Michigan State doesn't seem to make sense, and it does not geographically, but I will let you know why we went this route in just a second. In the Eastern Division, we've got Ohio State, Indiana, Purdue, Penn State, Maryland, and Rutgers. Okay, it would only make sense that Indiana and Purdue would play in the Central Division because of geography, and then Michigan, Michigan State. Of course, Michigan's here, Indiana's here. Michigan's further east, they would play in the Big Ten Eastern Division, of course, right? Well, let's look at the records and see why we made a slight geographic adjustment for fair and equitable play. When we look at the records over this past season, we see that the Western Division, again, is strong, 52-25, but not quite as strong because Nebraska was weak last season at 4-8. The Central Division is 43-34 with Michigan and Michigan State, and not Indiana and Purdue. If you include Indiana and Purdue, this Central Division is well under 500 for this past season, and then the Eastern Division, add up all the teams, and it's 46-31 with Indiana, Purdue taking the place of Michigan, Michigan State. And again, if you had Michigan, Michigan State in place of Indiana and Purdue, that win-loss record for the Eastern Division is ridiculous, with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State all in one division, and Michigan State, who is typically a strong football program as well. Look at the 2-year record, and out west, 91-62. Not quite as strong as the 1-year record because, of course, Washington and USC were down 2 years ago. In the Central Division, you've got a 2-year record that's very close to the Western Division at 92-68. That would not have been the case had we gone with strict geography. And then in the Eastern Division, more balanced at 87-60 over the last 2 years, again, without Michigan and Michigan State. If you include the Spartans and the Wolverines in the Eastern Division, the 2-year record for the Big Ten Eastern Division would have been 105-50, too strong and not fair. How do you schedule these teams? Well, same basic concept is that you play everyone within your division. So you got 6 teams in each division. That's 5 games right out of the gate. Yes, we are protecting rivalries, but because we are going to protect rivalries, this makes it somewhat tricky in scheduling the rest of the game. So consider Iowa, for example. They're going to play the other 5 teams in their division, and we're going to protect Iowa's rivalry games against Minnesota and Wisconsin, even though they're not in the same division. So that locks up 7 of the 9 Iowa games each and every season that they play the same team. So they only have 2 other games to float. So it's going to take 5 years for those other games to circulate through and catch the rest of the teams in the Big Ten. So again, our points with the schedule is everyone plays each other within the division. You protect your rivalry games. So this is not the same number of games for everyone. Not everyone has the same number of rivalries, and this is where college football has screwed it up, in these conferences in particular. You don't have to protect the same number of games for every team. You don't have to make up rivalries as placeholders. You simply protect the rivalries that make sense. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan, Indiana, Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, etc., etc. You protect the real rivalries, not as placeholders as they do in the ACC and the SEC. The playoffs are similar to the other format, the 1 versus the 4 seed, the 2 versus the 3. And in this sequence, of course, we go with all the division champs, the top 3 seeds, and then you go with the best record of the second place teams to play in that semifinal game. And if it's a tie and those 2 teams did not play, then you go with an NFL-style tie-breaking system. You look at common opponents, you look at points against, and point differentials. Or one other basic format we can go with is just line up all the teams in the Big Ten 1 through 18, similar to what they do currently in the Big 12 before this 2023 season. 1 through 10 in the Big 12, the top 2 play in the conference championship game. No divisions, no pods. The issue there is the more teams you have in a conference, when you have no divisions or pods, and you're just selecting based on record, is you've got a more likelihood of having ties. Well, that's not an issue if the 2 teams that tied for a particular place, let's say we go with the playoff format, the mini playoff format with 4 teams in the Big Ten playoff. Well, if you've got a tie for 4th place, the number 4 seed to make the playoff, then you simply go by record, of course, number 1. Then number 2, you go by the tie-breaking system of head-to-head. But if the 2 teams didn't play, and the more teams you got in a conference, the more likelihood that they didn't play during the season, because each team in this new Big Ten of 18 teams will not play 8 other teams in the conference, because they play 9 conference games. They don't play themselves, so that's 10 teams that they play. So there's 8 other teams that each individual school is not playing each season. So there's a high likelihood that there are going to be ties between teams that did not play each other. So if we're okay with a NFL-style tie-breaking system, then so be it. I don't like it. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it's equitable for 2 teams to tie, let's say, for 4th place in the Big Ten at 6-3, or shoot, you could have 4 teams tie for 4th place in the Big Ten at 6-3, and then you're sorting out a mess. But that's one way to do it. I would go with proposal number 1, the 4 divisions, because it gives you so much more scheduling flexibility, because you've got less division games that tie you up, and then you can use your committee to make the schedule equitable in playing 5 or 6 other teams within the conference and still protecting all the rivalries. Food for thought. Certainly a number of ways to do it. This is not exhaustive right here. These are the 3 basic routes that I see to determining a Big Ten that is going to 18 and maybe even beyond that. Check out the videos that we posted last summer after USC and UCLA announced to the Big Ten. We had a whole lot of fun dissecting the Big Ten with USC and UCLA. So we've got those videos out there. We've dropped them down in the comment section below. And then also with Notre Dame and Stanford, with Oregon and Washington. Shoot, Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. We talked about that days after USC and UCLA were added and played this out. So please check those out. Stanford and Cal. We've done a number of variations here at the Voice of College Football. Would love to hear from you and get your perspective on this down in the comment section below. Join us for our next call-in show as well. Give me a call. Let's talk college football right here at the Voice of College Football.